What if the oldest instructions ever handed down to humanity weren't meant to be understood right away? Maybe they were left for us to decipher over thousands of years. Picture this: scattered across thousands of ancient clay tablets, pressed into muddy earth 5,000 years ago, the Anunnaki left a message. Not for the people of their time, but for someone far in the future. Maybe for us. Now these tablets sit in museum basements from Chicago to Baghdad, tucked behind glass and nestled in foam, silent and waiting. Each one's covered in cuneiform, the little wedge-shaped marks that look a bit like bird tracks in mud. Sure, most of them are just old records, receipts, inventories, stories. But maybe, just maybe, they're more. Maybe there's a hidden message, an encoded legacy. Instructions disguised as myths or math or maps of the stars, waiting for us to finally catch up and read what's really there. Imagine you're at the Oriental Institute in Chicago on a cold winter afternoon. Snow's falling outside, softening the city's edge. The museum's quiet, almost empty. Your footsteps echo as you wander through halls lined with relics from when writing itself was brand new. Towering stone carvings from Assyria, stiff statues of long-gone kings. Then you step into a smaller room, chilled and sealed for fragile things. Here, glass cases hold rows of clay tablets. Some are no bigger than your hand, others could span your arm. All of them are marked with those weird, ancient wedges, impressions pushed into clay with reeds, then hardened by fire or accident. Next to the giant statues, these tablets seem almost plain, small, easy to overlook, but they hold something the stone giants never could: words. Real thoughts captured so well that 5,000 years later, scholars can still read them. And here's the thing: among the thousands of tablets tucked away in university collections from Philadelphia to Berkeley, some hold patterns nobody noticed until computers got powerful enough to spot them. Patterns hinting that the Sumerians weren't just writing down what they knew, they were passing on knowledge from an even older world. Knowledge meant to last, not just for a lifetime, but for ages. Knowledge that only makes sense now, with the technology to see it. That's the question that keeps experts up at night. Those who spend their lives translating these wedge marks, pressed into clay by hands that turned to dust before the pyramids even existed. Were the Sumerians just scribes, recording their world? Or were they copying instructions they didn't really get, but knew were important, because someone long before told them, "Don't let these words disappear"? Before we head down into the archives where these tablets sleep, really try to picture it. Imagine the basement of the University of Pennsylvania Museum, tucked behind locked doors and security checkpoints. Down here, it's always 68 degrees, the humidity fixed at 45%. The air smells faintly of cardboard, metal shelving, and something older, maybe the clay itself, still clinging to traces of Mesopotamian earth it was shaped from 5,000 years ago. The storage room goes on and on, rows of industrial shelves fatting into the shadows. The lights stay dim to protect what's inside. Every shelf is lined with boxes labeled by catalog numbers: CBS 10,673, CBS 15,318, CBS 29,116. That CBS stands for Catalog of the Babylonian Section, a system set up back when American archaeologists first started hauling these tablets home from Iraq. Behind every number, there's a piece of clay, a voice from the ancient world, maybe even a key to something we lost or never really knew at all. Some of these tablets rest in custom foam cradles, their surfaces so delicate you can't touch them without special tools. Others lie wrapped in acid-free tissue, just waiting to be studied, translated, photographed. A handful of the most important texts have already been scanned in crazy high resolution, so scholars anywhere can zoom in on every wedge and line, no gloves required. But thousands more haven't been scanned. They haven't been translated. Their secrets are still sealed inside clay that somehow survived Babylon's collapse, the Mongol hordes, 2 world wars, and all the madness that swept through the Middle East since. Now, they're sitting in total silence, deep in a Pennsylvania basement, just waiting. If you're still with me, if you're ready for a trip into the heart of ancient mystery, let's go. We'll leave these quiet archives behind and head straight to the dig sites in Iraq, where the tablets first came out of the earth. We'll stand shoulder to shoulder with archaeologists, feel the Mesopotamian sun beating down, sweep away dust nobody's disturbed since the last scribe walked there. We'll visit labs where scientists use jaw-dropping tech to reveal words the eye can't see, ink that disappeared thousands of years ago, but that modern tools can still find. We'll meet experts who have spent their lives reading cuneiform, who see those wedge marks as clearly as you read this page, and who have started to notice something wild. They see patterns that hint writing didn't slowly develop from scratch, but was handed down, taught by someone who already had a finished system, and just passed it on to survivors rebuilding after disaster. Patterns showing the math in these tablets wasn't pieced together through endless trial and error, but handed down from minds who understood stuff we're only starting to grasp again. Patterns that say the astronomical notes in cuneiform weren't gathered little by Sumerian stargazers, but copied from records that were already complete. This story doesn't start with answers. It starts with patterns. Weird, unexplainable patterns that archaeologists and linguists have been spotting for more than 100 years, but haven't been able to figure out. Back in the 1870s, when people first started cracking cuneiform, they figured they'd find a slow, messy evolution. It was the Victorian age. Everyone was thinking about evolution, about things changing bit by bit over vast stretches of time. Language should have worked the same way. Simple pictures turning into symbols, clumsy early efforts giving way to polished systems. You'd expect to see the messy middle steps left behind in the dirt. But that's not what they found. When museums in Britain and America got their first shipments of tablets from Mesopotamia, and scholars like Henry Rawlinson and George Smith finally figured out how to read cuneiform, what they saw blew up all those old ideas. Right from the start, cuneiform was complex. Over 700 separate signs, able to capture not just things and actions, but abstract ideas, grammar, even phonetic combos. This wasn't basic stuff. It was a mashup system. Some signs stood for whole words, others for sounds, others just to clarify meaning without being spoken. Let's put this in perspective. Our modern writing systems took ages to get this complicated. Egyptian hieroglyphs started out simple and got fancier over generations. Chinese evolved through clear, visible stages. Even our alphabet came together piecemeal, from Phoenician to Greek to Latin, with each step still visible in old inscriptions. But cuneiform, it just shows up around 3400 BCE, ready to go, used for accounts, contracts, star charts, you name it. So where are the rough drafts? Where's the evidence of failed experiments? Where's the long trail of development that ought to be there but is? Samuel Noah Kramer, an American archaeologist, spent 40 years at the University of Pennsylvania Museum chasing this exact question. Born in Ukraine in 1897 and growing up in Philadelphia, Kramer dedicated his life to Sumerian studies and became one of the world's top experts on the subject. He picked up cuneiform when he was young, then spent years in Iraq in the 1930s, knee-deep in excavations. He brought back notes on thousands of tablets, detailed, obsessive, the kind of thing only someone truly hooked could produce. His office was famous, almost mythic. Books crammed from floor to ceiling, papers everywhere, and always, somewhere on his cluttered desk, photos of those clay tablets scrawled with wedge-shaped signs he could read as easily as English. Kramer's biggest splash came in 1956 when he published History Begins at Sumer. The book rattled off a whole catalog of Sumerian firsts, the first schools, the first written laws, the first literary debates, proverbs. The list just kept going, and the message was obvious. If you're looking for the roots of civilization, Sumer got there first. But even as he celebrated these breakthroughs, Kramer kept circling around a problem he couldn't shake. How did it all appear so suddenly? How did people with no written language just show up with not only writing, but stories and poems? Not just counting, but full-blown legal codes. Not just simple sums, but surprisingly advanced math. He was more open about his doubts in letters to colleagues than he was in print. In one note from 1963, he admitted, "The more I translate, the more convinced I become that the Sumerians inherited much of their knowledge rather than developed it. The tablets read like reference manuals, not like the work of pioneers figuring things out for the first time. They're too confident, too assured, too complete." He started calling Sumer history's first sudden civilization. And honestly, the phrase says it all. Civilizations aren't supposed to just pop up. They're supposed to crawl forward inch by inch, each generation building on the last. A potter learns from her mother, who learned from her grandmother, each one tweaking and improving, century after century, until you finally get beautiful ceramics. Metalworkers have to experiment, discover copper, and then, after who knows how long, figure out how to make bronze. Language should be the same. A slow evolution from grunts to words to sentences to stories, all over countless generations. But Sumer shows up with complex irrigation already in place. Math not just present, but standardized across cities. Astronomical records that chart Venus for years at a time. A writing system that could capture all of it. And the Sumerians themselves never claimed to invent these things. In their own stories, they always said civilization was handed to them, taught by the Anunnaki, those who came from heaven, who showed them how to build, plant, measure, and write, then left them to carry on. Kramer noticed something else that made this even weirder. Some tablets had knowledge that just didn't fit. Math that went way beyond what any merchant needed. Tables of squares and roots, calculations for numbers so huge they'd never come up in daily life. Astronomical records tracking cycles that take thousands of years to complete. Medicinal recipes using plants and compounds that modern chemistry says actually work. Compounds that should have taken ages of trial and error to discover. One tablet in particular, CBS 15318, really got to him. It had a problem about compound interest. Here, alone, here's the interest, how long until the debt doubles? The solution used exponential math. That's the kind of stuff Western mathematicians didn't formalize until John Napier over 3,000 years later. Yet there's a Sumerian scribe, around 2000 BCE, working it out like it's just another day at the office. So where did that knowledge come from? How did a civilization supposedly new to writing already have math that Europe wouldn't see for millennia? The puzzle kept gnawing at him. Another one of Kramer's translations, CBS 10673, holds that hymn to Nisaba I mentioned earlier. But once you read the whole thing, it gets even stranger. The hymn doesn't just praise Nisaba as the goddess of writing. It says she opened the house of learning and revealed the me. But then it starts listing those me as if it's rattling off items from a curriculum or a library catalog, not poetry. The ME for metallurgy, the ME for architecture, the ME for music, the ME for sexual intercourse, the ME for war, the ME for justice. Each me comes across as a complete, perfect body of knowledge already existing, just waiting for Nisaba to hand it over. Not something people figured out little by little, but something she revealed to humanity. That word, revealed, shows up again and again in Sumerian texts about knowledge and technology. Not created, not discovered, not even developed, revealed, uncovered, made available. It's as if civilization was always there, just out of sight, and the Sumerians' job was to access it, to receive it from somewhere, or someone who already had it. That passive angle drove Kramer nuts because it clashed with everything he'd learned about how progress works. We're supposed to invent, to experiment, to learn from mistakes and build on what came before. But the Sumerians, they called themselves recipients, not inventors, students, not pioneers. And you know what? The tablets actually back that up. Out of the thousands Kramer worked through, a fair number were just baffling, not because the writing was damaged, he could read the words just fine, but because the content didn't make any sense. The grammar was solid Sumerian. The words were familiar, but the meaning, opaque. The texts seemed to describe ideas or processes that didn't fit anything Kramer recognized from Sumerian life. These weren't broken fragments missing half the story. They were whole, and yet they talked about things Kramer couldn't place, with terms he couldn't define, referencing knowledge structures he couldn't reconstruct. Some tablets looked like copies of even older works, with scribes scribbling notes in the margins. The ancient words must not be altered or, meaning unclear, copied exactly as written. Kramer loved these little asides. They showed that even the scribes were confused. They could read the words but didn't really get what they meant. Still, they copied everything faithfully. Accuracy mattered more than understanding. Why would anyone spend hours copying out a text they couldn't even comprehend? Why bother preserving something so mysterious? For Kramer, only one answer really fit, though he almost never said it outright in his published work: religious duty. The scribes believed these were sacred texts, inspired by the gods, too precious to risk losing even if nobody alive could explain them anymore. They saw themselves as archivists, caretakers of knowledge from an earlier era, an era closer to the Anunnaki, when the teachers who first revealed these things were still around to explain. In the 1980s, near the end of his life, Kramer started swapping letters with researchers using computers to analyze cuneiform tablets. These early digital tools could spot patterns and connections that the human eye missed, odd regularities in mathematical tablets that hinted at coding, strange consistencies in astronomical texts that looked like data compression. Kramer was fascinated, but he died in 1990 before the research could really take off. It's almost as if the tablets were just waiting for technology advanced enough to spot what Sumerian scribes had hidden, or what the Anunnaki had encoded in plain sight, waiting for a generation of scholars who could read both the words and the patterns beneath them, waiting for us, right now, at the very moment when we finally have the tools to unlock the knowledge those clay tablets were designed to carry. This pattern shows up everywhere in Sumerian civilization. Knowledge that arrives fully formed with no sign of gradual development. Complex systems that just appear as if dropped from the sky. Technologies and traditions described not as recent breakthroughs but as ancient inheritances. And always in the background of every hymn, every king's boast, every dusty tablet, the Anunnaki, the teachers from heaven, the ones who revealed the ME, the ones who set up civilization and then left, leaving humanity with a set of instructions we've spent thousands of years trying to understand. Deep in the University of Pennsylvania Museum, there's a clay tablet, CBS 10673, that looks at first glance like just another ancient hymn. It honors Nisaba, the Sumerian goddess of writing and grain. But honestly, calling it a hymn barely scratches the surface. As you read the translation, sitting with words a Sumerian scribe pressed into wet clay 4,000 years ago, you get this strange sense that you're not just seeing worship. It's more like a catalog, a list, an index pointing to a whole library of knowledge that supposedly existed before anyone ever bothered to write it down. The tablet starts off predictably enough. There's praise for Nisaba's wisdom, her generosity. Then suddenly the tone shifts. The language tightens up, turning almost technical. She who has opened the house of learning, she who has revealed the ME. And then comes the list, over 100 of these ME. Each one stands for a complete body of knowledge. Not just skills or tricks people figured out, but entire systems, cosmic codes for how the world works. The text doesn't talk about these as things people invented. It frames them as revelations, knowledge that was always out there, just waiting for Nisaba to unlock it. And the details matter, so let's dig in. Kingship is a ME, the whole idea of organized rule, packaged as something real, not just something humans cobbled together. Priesthood too. Truth gets a spot right alongside descending into the underworld and ascending from the underworld. It treats these as equal, as if entering the land of the dead or climbing out again takes as much know-how as, say, ruling a kingdom or telling the truth. Metalworking shows up. Not just the raw ore or the shiny finished product, but the knowledge itself. How to pull metal from stone, heat it, shape it, mix it. The whole chain of technology boiled down to a single word, a single decree from the gods: the art of building, leatherworking, basket weaving, music, the scribe's craft, even wisdom itself, not as something you pick up bit by bit, but as a complete thing, a gift, fear, victory, counseling, judgment, decision-making. Each one stands alone, whole. The text insists these weren't developed, they were revealed. Then the list gets weirder. There's a ME for the putting on of the queenship, one for the plundering of cities, another for the straightening of tongue, which honestly, who knows what that really means? The giving of just verdicts gets its own ME. These aren't natural groupings. They don't feel like the way people today would sort out knowledge. Instead, they're almost cryptic, hinting at some internal logic only the original scribes understood. It's like peeking at a card catalog written in a code lost to time. You sense the order, but the categories feel alien. The feeling that runs through the whole text isn't so much invention as recovery. Nisaba isn't inventing things. She's opening doors, letting people into rooms that were always there but locked. It's the language of discovery, but not discovery as in finding something new. More like dusting off ancient archives, pulling back the curtain on things that existed long before anyone picked up a stylus. There's another text from Nippur that takes this idea even further. It talks about the ME being kept in the Abzu, a vast, primordial freshwater ocean beneath the earth, at least in Sumerian imagination. Enki, the god of wisdom, guards them. And here the ME aren't just abstract ideas. They're actual things, tablets, maybe crystal or stone objects packed with knowledge. They can even be stolen. In one myth, the goddess Inanna gets Enki drunk, tricks him into handing over the ME, and then piles them onto her boat for the trip back to Uruk. On the surface, it's a story about divine mischief, but dig deeper and you start to wonder. Why would knowledge be something you can carry? Why would wisdom show up as discrete packets, as objects you can haul from place to place? Maybe the ME aren't just metaphors. Maybe they're actual physical devices, storage, archives, information encoded in a form you can hold, study, copy. The Sumerians didn't have words for data storage or information technology, so they described it the only way they could, as divine tablets locked in a sacred underwater vault, guarded by the god of wisdom, waiting for someone worthy or just clever enough to break in and take them. Let's just take this at face value for a second instead of reading it as some big metaphor. There's this idea: before the Sumerians showed up, there was already an archive of knowledge. Not just scraps, either, everything from how to work metal to running a government, even how to track time. This knowledge wasn't fragile. It was kept in a way that let it survive disasters. The Sumerians, in their own heads, saw themselves as digging into this archive. They weren't inventing civilization from scratch. They were recovering something old, something handed down. So where was this archive? The Abzu, the deep primeval freshwater ocean, comes up in their stories. Maybe that's myth, maybe not. Sumerian cities lived and died by the Tigris and Euphrates, plus all those canals. Water was everything to them. No water, no crops, no cities, nothing. When they said knowledge came from the Abzu, maybe they meant that the knowledge survived in places with water, places you could actually live through a disaster, or maybe they meant something more literal. Maybe the archive was underground, tucked away in caves or chambers safe from whatever wiped everything else out, in damp places where water slowly seeped through, enough to keep things from rotting away in the open. When archaeologists dig up Sumerian sites, sometimes they find temple foundations that go way deeper than you'd expect. At Eridu, the oldest spot anyone ever lived in Mesopotamia, they found that the temple had been rebuilt 16 times, each one stacked neatly on the last. But the foundations, they go way down, past what's needed to hold up a building, deep into the water table, into layers that are always wet. Why dig that far down? Why build into the groundwater? Maybe it was about protection, or maybe access. Maybe the temple wasn't just for worship, but actually a shaft, an entrance down to whatever was hidden below, to an archive in the Abzu, in underground rooms that outlasted whatever disaster came before the Sumerians. And rebuilding the temple over and over, Maybe that wasn't just a religious thing. Maybe it was maintenance, making sure people could always get to those archives, even centuries later, even after floods and who knows what else. And then there's the ME. These aren't just random scraps of knowledge. They're organized, grouped, filed. Kingship and priesthood go together, governance and religion linked. All the crafts, metalwork, basketry, building, bundled as practical arts. Music and wisdom side by side, as if harmony and knowledge were two sides of the same coin. This is information architecture, someone deliberately sorting knowledge so people could actually find what they needed. It's basically how we build databases now. You don't just toss info in a pile. You organize, make hierarchies, connect related stuff, set things up so you can find what matters when you need it. The ME sound like database tables, like folders in a library, built by someone who knew future users wouldn't want to dig through everything to get what they wanted. And if the ME really were a knowledge system, set up by the Anunnaki or whoever came before, then the clay tablets we find now aren't originals. They're copies, downloads. Someone pulled info from a master archive and wrote it in cuneiform, so the survivors of whatever disaster could use it to rebuild. The Sumerians didn't invent writing to share their own ideas. They built writing to copy down what was already there, to turn knowledge from a system they could tap into, but not really grasp, into something they could keep and pass on. That's probably why cuneiform shows up fully formed. It doesn't look like it slowly evolved, because it didn't. It was built all at once for one reason: to record information that already existed. All 700 signs show up together, each one tied to a concept or sound from the original source. The system is complicated from day one because the stuff they were copying was already complicated. That's why so many tablets have scribbled notes in the margins about copying from older sources. The scribes weren't just ticking off references, they were actually recording how they worked. They wrote down when they pulled material from the archive, from the Abzu, from the ME that Enki guarded. When they said according to the old writings, they weren't fussing over citation style. They were making it clear. This bit came straight from the ancient archive, not their own words. This also helps make sense of those strange tablets with weird, out-of-place information, stuff that doesn't match what we know about Sumerian knowledge. The scribes were copying what was in front of them, even if they didn't understand it. Their job was to preserve, not to edit. Copy everything. Save it all. Even the baffling bits, especially the baffling bits, because who knows? Maybe those are the pieces that actually matter. The parts that only make sense once someone, someday, has the tools to crack them open. It's the same reason the Sumerians kept saying knowledge was revealed or descended from heaven. They weren't being poetic, they meant it. They had access to information they didn't create. They found knowledge that came from before their time, pulled from a storehouse they didn't build. To them, it must have felt like the gods themselves handed down wisdom. The Anunnaki's archive opened, and they described the moment the only way they could. Wisdom came from heaven. Nisaba unlocked the house of learning. Look at the numbers. The University of Pennsylvania Museum has over 30,000 cuneiform tablets. Yale, nearly 40,000. The British Museum, more than 130,000. Then there's the Louvre, Berlin, Istanbul, Baghdad, and a long list of smaller museums. All together, they're holding onto hundreds of thousands of these clay tablets. Most have been cataloged, a lot have been photographed, but just a fraction have actually been translated and published. There are thousands, maybe tens of thousands, just sitting in storage, waiting for someone to dig in, waiting for funding, or for some big digital project to speed things up. So what's still out there? Locked away in those untranslated tablets. What's missing from the ME? Which instructions did the Anunnaki leave behind that we haven't even glimpsed yet? Because the right tablet is still wrapped up in tissue in some museum basement. Its secrets pressed into clay, 4,000 years old, and nobody's read them. The ME list is a reminder. Knowledge is this one giant block. It's modular, broken into pieces you can learn on their own, mix together, build from. If the Anunnaki were some advanced civilization, they'd get this. You can't just dump everything you know and expect people to understand. It's too much. The gap is too big. So you break it up, you make it digestible, you turn it into lessons. The ME weren't everything the Anunnaki knew. They were the pieces they chose to pass on, the essential kits for a civilization trying to rebuild after disaster. And here, where things get really weird, even unsettling for the scholars who spend their lives on these texts. Out of the thousands of cuneiform tablets dug up from Sumerian sites and stashed in museums, a good chunk just don't add up. Not because they're broken, though plenty are. Not because the script is unreadable, weather does a number on clay, but sometimes the signs are crisp and clear. The problem is, even when the text is perfect, it makes no sense. Let me spell that out. Imagine a seasoned Assyriologist, someone who's read cuneiform for ages, who's as comfortable with Sumerian as with their own language. They pick up a tablet, the writing's flawless, grammar's on point, vocabulary checks out, it's all there. But when you read it, the story just doesn't fit anywhere in the Sumerian world we know. It's like opening a book and finding instructions for something nobody ever seen. Dr. Jenna Wilson, a researcher at the Oriental Institute in Chicago, talked about this strange tablet during a lecture back in 2019. She called it a 7526. On the surface, it looks like a typical Sumerian set of instructions. Do this, then that, and you'll get some result. But once you dig in, the whole thing falls apart. The recipe calls for minerals that don't match any known Sumerian terms. It tells you to grind them together in mathematically precise ratios, heat the mixture until it turns like starlight in water, and then expose it to something called the breath of the north wind at midnight. None of it adds up. Dr. Wilson and her team spent months trying to figure this thing out. Was it just a metaphor? Maybe parts were missing. Or was it some ritual we just don't get, but the text is complete? The language is dead literal, step by step, no poetry, no hidden meanings. The measurements are exact. It's not a ceremony or a myth. It reads like directions for making something. But what and why? They found the tablet in a temple archive at Nippur, tucked away with other important records, administrative stuff, astronomy, the essentials. Clearly, someone thought it was valuable. Scribes even noted that it was copied from an older source. So who was copying it and for what? If the Sumerians could actually do what this recipe described, why is there no other record of it? And if they couldn't, why bother saving it so carefully? The answer Dr. Wilson landed on, though she was cautious about saying it out loud, was that the Sumerians saved this tablet because they couldn't actually use it, but they hoped someone in the future might. Maybe they inherited the text from an older tradition, something passed down from people or sources with technology way beyond theirs. They didn't get it, but they copied it exactly, kept it safe, and basically left it for someone else to figure out. She's not the only one running into this kind of mystery. Dr. Michael Chen over at Yale works on mathematical tablets, rows and rows of numbers, the sort of thing you'd expect to be simple enough to crack. After all, numbers are supposed to be universal, but some of Yale's tablets just don't fit. The calculations don't match anything in Sumerian math. The numbers aren't land measurements because the ratios are all wrong. They're not about the stars either. And they don't look like any kind of accounting or trade. What's left is a page full of numbers laid out in patterns that look intentional, but they refuse to make sense. Dr. Chen started running computer analyses, algorithms that hunt for hidden patterns. What he found is both fascinating and a little unsettling. Some sequences, when you convert them from Sumerian base 60 into binary, line up with patterns used in information encoding, less like old math, more like someone stashed data in number form. One tablet he studied, YBC 7242, holds a string of numbers that, when you run a Fourier analysis on them, a method for finding hidden cycles, show frequencies that just don't belong in Sumerian math. Instead, they match the same ratios you find in modern digital signal processing, the kind of math that underpins everything from CDs to Wi-Fi. But this tablet is from 2000 BCE. How on earth does a Sumerian artifact contain number patterns that fit 20th century information theory? Dr. Chen shared his results at a conference in 2021. The reaction was all over the place. Some people shrugged and said he was chasing shadows. If you dig long enough, you'll find patterns anywhere, and modern tools can make ancient data look like it's saying something new. Others weren't so quick to dismiss it. They argued that it's worth taking a closer look, suggesting that maybe we've missed something big about what the Sumerians actually knew. After the formal sessions ended, a couple of researchers started talking quietly, tossing around some pretty wild ideas. What if the Sumerians weren't just recording math for the sake of it? What if they were actually hiding information in ways that only make sense once you've got the right tools to decode it? Maybe all those mathematical tablets aren't really about math at all. They're just data, compressed into numbers because numbers last. Words fade, cultures vanish. But mathematical patterns stick around, even when the people who made them are long gone. Honestly, this way of looking at things fits a little too well with other stuff we've found. There are tablets that are clearly copies of even older writings, where the scribes jot down confused little notes in the margins. Take tablet CBS 11319 from the Penn Museum. Someone, clearly not the original scribe, added a note in a totally different handwriting. When you translate it, it basically says, "The ancient words must not be altered." I have copied them exactly, though their meaning escapes me. May future scribes understand what I cannot. That's wild. The scribe comes right out and admits he has no idea what he's copying. He's preserving something important even though he doesn't get it. But he does it anyway because it's his job, or maybe he feels he has to, or it's just what you do in his culture. But this isn't busy work. These aren't throwaway practice tablets. This is serious archival work, people making sure knowledge sticks around, even when they don't know what it means. There's another note like that in a British museum tablet. Meaning unclear, copied exactly as written, according to the old writings kept in the house of Enki. Enki, the god of wisdom, the one who guarded the Emi and the Abzu. So this scribe thought he was copying from seriously ancient sources, archives even older than his own civilization, stuff from the time when the Anunnaki supposedly still walked the earth. And these aren't just one-offs. There are dozens of tablets with notes like this. When you put them all together, you start to see a picture, a culture that knows it's handling inherited knowledge, keeping an archive it doesn't totally understand, passing it down anyway, generation after generation, just to make sure the information survives, even if the meaning slips away. You see it in how they cared for the tablets too. They baked the clay hard so it would last. They sorted the tablets by topic, labeled them, kept them together in neat collections. Sometimes they went even further, burying tablets in foundation deposits under temples, sealing them up in jars or brick boxes, safe from water or damage. This wasn't random storage. These were deliberate, almost paranoid efforts to protect what mattered, no matter what happened next. At they found tablets like this buried deep in the ziggurats' foundations. Leonard Woolley dug them up in the 1920s and 30s, finding layer after layer, each one put there by a new generation of builders who probably didn't even know why, just that you always did it. So why hide tablets in the foundations? Why tuck them away where no one can read them? Because foundations last. Buildings burn, libraries collapse, cities fall apart. But the base, the big stone platform, it sticks around. Even if everything above gets wrecked, what's hidden down below stays safe. That's real long-term thinking. This is how you plan for disaster. You hide your most important knowledge where it'll survive, even if everything else is gone. And what did they bury? Not stories, not myths. They left behind the hard stuff, astronomy tables, math formulas, medical texts. The kind of information you desperately need if you were trying to rebuild after a catastrophe. The basics, how to plant crops, chart the stars, heal the sick, build shelters. The things that make civilization possible. If the Anunnaki were real, if they'd been through disaster before, if they'd helped people start over after a flood, they would have known exactly what mattered most. They'd know what gets lost when everything falls apart, and they wouldn't waste precious space on the trivial. They'd focus on the essentials, the knowledge that lets you rebuild instead of slipping back into the dark. That probably explains why so many untranslated tablets are packed with technical details that just seem out of place for their time. These aren't bits of Sumerian wisdom. They're Anunnaki knowledge, written down in Sumerian, kept safe by scribes who clearly knew they were important, even if they had no clue how to use that information themselves. It's like instructions waiting around for the day humans would finally catch up, realize what was being described, and have the tools to actually try it out. Dr. Sarah Martinez over at the Smithsonian has been digging through untranslated technical tablets from different museum collections, looking for patterns that might finally help unlock their secrets. She's noticed a lot of these tough texts share some weird similarities. They use grammar you don't see in normal Sumerian writing. The vocabulary is super specialized, popping up almost nowhere else. The measurements don't match standard Sumerian units. And you always find them stored in temple archives, preserved with care, sometimes even with notes saying they were copied from older originals. In a paper she published in 2022, Dr. Martinez suggested these might be examples of a technical sublanguage, a special kind of jargon with its own rules, cooked up just to encode certain kinds of knowledge. We do the same thing now, honestly. Medical, legal, programming. Each world invents its own lingo, and unless you're in the club, it sounds like gibberish. Maybe the Anunnaki did the same thing, and Sumerian scribes just memorized enough to copy everything over, without really knowing what it all meant. That's probably why these tablets look right on the surface, perfect grammar, but the meaning just slips through your fingers. The scribes were following the rules, but the actual words were a mystery. It's like someone copying code in a programming language they've never learned. The syntax is spot on, but ask them what it does and they'll just shrug. If that's the case, cracking these tablets doesn't come down to better Sumerian. It's about figuring out what kind of technical knowledge the text is talking about, then bringing in experts from that field to make sense of the jargon. If it's chemistry, you need a chemist who can spot familiar compounds and processes hiding behind strange terms. If it's astronomy, you need someone who can unravel celestial math, even if it's wrapped up in Sumerian notation. If it's genetic information, you want a biologist who can see hints of heredity and biology, even when it's dressed up in metaphors about clay and breath. And we're finally starting to do that. Teams of Assyriologists, scientists, and computer pros are teaming up and finally making progress on tablets that stump people for decades. Back in 2018, Yale cuneiform experts and MIT computer scientists joined forces and cracked a tablet that had been untranslatable since 1961. Turns out, it described an acoustic phenomenon. Once some acoustical engineers got involved, the metaphors suddenly made sense. They weren't poetry, they were technical notes, describing sound waves as best as ancient Mesopotamian language could manage. So how many more tablets are out there, waiting for the right specialist to see what's actually written? How much knowledge is just sitting in museum vaults, perfectly preserved, waiting for someone who finally gets it? Take VAT 4924, for example. It's a tablet with a bunch of number sequences that don't match any known Sumerian math. They're not land surveys or grain counts. They're not star charts or calendars. Just numbers lined up in odd patterns, clearly intentional, but nobody can quite crack the code. For years, people thought it was just a student exercise. But this tablet was found in a temple archive, not a classroom, stored with important records. And those numbers, they repeat at regular intervals and show mathematical relationships that look more like a code than random scribbling. So what's it encoding? And who was supposed to understand it? Now let's talk about those astronomical tablets. The Venus tablet of Amisajuka is a real standout. Someone copied it around 1650 BCE, but it actually records observations from centuries before that. What's wild is how closely it tracks Venus, down to the day, over a span of 21 years. It marks exactly when Venus pops up and disappears from view, matching what modern science says, almost to the letter. You don't get that kind of precision from a few people glancing at the sky. That's generations of careful, organized watching, people handing down records, probably for centuries. Venus has a synodic period of about 584 days. That's the time it takes for the planet to wind up back in the same position in the sky as seen from Earth. To spot the bigger pattern and predict where Venus will be decades down the line, you need to track cycle after cycle. You also have to understand the math behind Venus's motion and how it relates to Earth's orbit. The Sumerians did this. They wrote tables that let them predict where planets would be, a level of accuracy nobody matched again until the Renaissance, 3,000 years later. Carl Sagan, the American astronomer, once pointed out that Sumerian astronomy seems way ahead of their actual tech. They didn't have telescopes or fancy tools to measure angles or clocks that ticked down to the second. Still, their data suggests they had all those things. So what gives? Maybe they were just incredibly patient, tracking the sky every single night, keeping records generation after generation. Or maybe they inherited a stockpile of observations from someone else. The tablets themselves hint at this. Margins often say things like, copied from ancient writings, or according to the old observations. The Sumerians weren't taking credit for the work. They said they found these records and passed them on, even translating from sources they already called old. You see the same thing in Sumerian medicine. There's a tablet from Nippur, about 2100 BCE, listing more than a dozen pharmaceutical recipes. It spells out ingredients: thyme, willow bark, cedar oil, fermented grain, plus how to prepare them, dosages, and what results to expect. When modern scientists checked these recipes, a lot of them held up. Willow bark has salicylic acid, the same stuff in aspirin. Thyme fights infections. These combinations make sense. They're practical, evidence-based. Somebody was paying close attention. But here, the odd part. These tablets don't show trial and error. There's no earlier version with failed attempts or gradual tweaks. The knowledge bursts onto the scene, fully formed as if it was already ancient before writing even started. Then there are the most mysterious tablets, the ones about sacred formulas or divine words. You find these tucked away in temple archives, copied with care for generations. They're written in Sumerian, but the meaning isn't clear. Some scholars think they're spells or prayers, but if you look closer, the structure feels more like instructions, step-by-step procedures. Some seem to describe chemical recipes, mixing things in exact amounts, heating them with directions like, until the substance is like the morning sun. Others give astronomical instructions, how to build or perform rituals when the stars are in certain places. A few have musical notation, not for catchy tunes, but for precise sequences of tones, with frequencies described as ratios. Jump to the 1970s. Carl Munk, an American mathematician, started digging into the locations of ancient sites, including Sumerian cities. He found that many of them sit at coordinates that, when you use Sumerian base 60 math, encode real mathematical constants. Take the ziggurat at Ur. Its location, once you crunch the numbers, connects to the precession of the equinoxes and the orbits of the planets. Maybe that's a fluke, but the pattern shows up again and again. Nippur, Eridu, Uruk. Each city sits at coordinates that, in sexagesimal notation, encode astronomical or mathematical information. So what happened? Did the Sumerians just pick random spots and were seeing patterns where none exist? Or did someone place these cities on purpose, weaving knowledge into the land itself, a kind of code that would survive, even if people forgot what it meant? Ziggurats throw a whole new layer onto the ancient cityscape. Building these stepped pyramids took a wild amount of effort, millions of mud bricks, decades of work, whole cities pitching in. And yet they weren't practical buildings. You won't find storage rooms, no military hideouts, not even living quarters inside. Instead, they were observatories and ritual platforms. People used them to watch the skies and mark out sacred events. Take the ziggurat of Ur. They rebuilt it around the 21st century BCE, but the foundation goes even further back. Its corners line up with the cardinal directions and the error, less than a degree. The staircases point right at the sunrise on the summer solstice. Those 7 tiers you see, restored in part now, each showed off a different color for a different celestial body. Saturn was black, Jupiter white, Mars red, the sun gold, the moon silver, Venus blue, Mercury green. The whole thing was like a walkable map of the cosmos, architecture as astronomy lesson. But why go to all that trouble? Why bake knowledge into bricks, align buildings just so, or hide math in city layouts? The Sumerians had their reasons. They said after the Great Flood, kingship came back down from heaven. That flood wasn't just a story. Archaeologists found thick silt layers at Ur, Shuruppak, and Kish. A real event, a reset button for civilization. All the old knowledge, gone under the mud. So when the survivors started over, they didn't just write things down. They built knowledge into the cities themselves. Architecture, city plans, myths passed on by word of mouth. Redundancy everywhere, like they were making sure no single disaster could wipe out everything they knew. Temple libraries show how serious they were. At Nippur, archaeologists dug up over 60,000 tablet pieces, sorted neatly by subject: astronomy, math, medicine, law, literature, myth. Instead of just one copy, they made several versions, copied by different scribes in different eras. Some tablets went through the kiln, fired hard to last for thousands of years. Others got buried under temple foundations, hidden time capsules waiting for the future. The Sumerians weren't just writing for their own time. They were packing away information for people they'd never meet. Look at a tablet from Lagash, around 2450 BCE, a treaty between city-states. Before it talks about the new border deal, the inscription says, "The border that was established by the god Ningirsu in ancient times, this border is restored again." Not created, restored. The treaty claims it's reviving something from way back, something the gods set up before anyone living could remember. You see this pattern again and again. Whenever the Sumerians talk about law or power, they always point backward to the oldest sources, to rules the gods, really, the Anunnaki, supposedly handed down. It's part myth, part constitution. And if the Anunnaki were really just an earlier civilization, not actual gods, then these texts are more like records of inheritance than stories of creation. The Anunnaki themselves come across as oddly specific. They're not some distant, all-powerful spirits lost in the clouds. They're administrators, judges, teachers. Enki, the top Anunnaki, organizes cities, teaches irrigation, invents writing, brings out the ME, the cosmic codes. Enlil lays down the law and the farming calendar. Ninmah shapes people from clay and something divine. Anu keeps the universe in order. Each one has a job, a proper domain. They act less like mystical gods and more like department heads in a giant bureaucracy. And the texts say they had physical bodies. They lived in temples, ate offerings, and showed up in person, at least until they withdrew after the flood. In the Atrahasis epic, the Anunnaki make humans because they're tired of doing all the hard work themselves. The story feels almost clinical, like someone following a recipe. Nintu and Enki take clay, mix in the blood of a slain god, and bring it all to life. At first, their prototypes don't turn out right. Some are flawed, so they tweak things, try again, and keep refining until they finally create humans who can reproduce and build civilization. The text doesn't call this magic. It treats it as craft, engineering, really. It's a process, not a miracle. Materials, steps, results. Strip away the myth, and what you've got is a story about deliberate creation. Beings with knowledge shaping others, putting traits into clay and blood so those traits will carry on. Now here's the weird part. Modern genetics turns up things the Sumerians couldn't have known, yet their story lines up in unexpected ways. Humans and chimps share over 98% of our DNA, but we're worlds apart. The split happened not that long ago, evolutionarily speaking. And if you look at some genes, especially the ones for our brains, for language, and how we think, they change fast, way faster than you'd expect. Some scientists say these changes don't fit the usual story of slow, random evolution. They look more like someone or something was pushing for certain traits, deliberately selecting. That's exactly what the Sumerian myth describes. Not slow drift, but intentional shaping, adding in something new, whether you call it intelligence, consciousness, or TAU, that wasn't there before. We call these stories myths because the alternative feels too wild to consider. But what if the Anunnaki weren't just legends? Imagine they were a real civilization, incredibly advanced, survivors from a time before the flood. They knew genetics, astronomy, math, and engineering, skills so far ahead that ancient people could only call them gods. Not because these beings claimed divinity, but because the knowledge gap was just that enormous. When they left, maybe after the flood, they didn't leave behind user manuals. They left instructions hidden in different forms, betting that someday, when humans caught up, we'd figure out how to read what they'd buried. Take the math tablets, for example. Plimpton 322, a clay tablet from ancient Babylon, sits at Columbia University. It's packed with Pythagorean triples, those sets of numbers that fit the a 2 plus b2 equals c2 equation. That's 1,000 years before Pythagoras, but the tablet isn't teaching the concept, it's using it. The math is just there, assumed, like everyone already knows it. Where did that knowledge come from? Another tablet, YBC 7289, sketches a square and its diagonal, with the square root of 2 calculated to 6 decimal places, 1.414213. That level of detail means they understood irrational numbers, something history claims didn't happen until the Greeks. But the Sumerians had it, carved in clay by a student copying an even older source. And their astronomy, even more impressive. The Mull, Apin tablets, written around 1000 BCE but based on much older records, list stars, constellations, and track planetary movements with a precision that screams long-term, careful observation. They note the heliacal risings of stars, those moments when a star first appears before sunrise, crucial for farming and navigation. Strangely, some of the data describes sky events that wouldn't happen for centuries after the tablets were made. How did they know? Maybe they had truly advanced mathematical models, or maybe they were copying from sources that had already tracked the sky through many cycles, projecting the patterns far into the future. Back in the 1960s, Gerald Hawkins, an American astronomer, took a close look at Stonehenge and realized it wasn't just a pile of rocks. It actually worked like an ancient astronomical calculator. It could predict eclipses, track the cycles of the sun and moon, and basically turned astronomy into architecture. All that knowledge was baked right into the stone, so you didn't need a single written word to keep it alive. The Sumerian ziggurats pulled off something similar. Their shape, the way they were laid out, even the ratios between their tiers, all of it lined up with mathematical constants and the rhythms of the planets and stars. Imagine losing every written record, every clay tablet. As long as the ziggurat stood, the knowledge survived. Walk around it with a measuring rope and the math would reveal itself. The building was a textbook in 3 dimensions, teaching anyone who bothered to look closely. This wasn't just a happy accident. Encoding the same information in buildings, stories, and writing, that's a strategy. If the Anunnaki really existed, and if they were as advanced as some believe, they must have known disaster could wipe out everything again. They'd seen it happen. The flood washed away whatever came before, so they didn't put all their eggs in one basket. They taught people how to write and filled tablets with knowledge, but they also built that knowledge into the very stones of their cities. City plans, myths, oral traditions, each one held a piece of the puzzle. If one way of passing on information failed, another could pick up the slack. Even the old myths are packed with hidden messages. Take the Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation story borrowed from Sumerian tradition. On the surface, it's just a story of gods fighting and the world being born from chaos. But look closer and it's really about separation. Fresh water from salt, earth from sky, day from night, order from chaos. The sequence of events in the myth actually lines up with what modern science says happened. First, energy and matter split, then stars and planets formed, and finally life appeared. It's cosmic evolution and the Big Bang, told in the only way people knew how to tell it back then. Other researchers have pushed these ideas even further. In the 1990s, Christopher Dunn, an American engineer, studied the Great Pyramid and argued it might have functioned as an ancient power plant, using chemistry and sound to generate energy. That theory is still hotly debated, but it points to a bigger idea. When you look at these ancient structures through the lens of science and engineering instead of just archaeology, they seem way more advanced than we expect. The same goes for Sumerian tablets. If you read them as stories or prayers, they're just mythology. But treat them as technical manuals or encrypted instructions, and suddenly you find hidden layers, deep math, astronomy, even chemistry. Think about it. What if the Anunnaki didn't want to hand us a simple, easy-to-read instruction manual? What if they left behind messages we could only understand when we reached a certain point in our own development? On the surface, the tablets are straightforward, myths, records, hymns. That's what kept them safe and worth copying. But buried in the numbers, the star charts, and the rituals, there's a deeper code. Information meant for people with the right scientific tools to finally crack it open. Maybe that's us, right now, finally able to read what's been hiding in plain sight for 5,000 years. That could explain why some tablets are still a mystery. It's not that we can't read the language, we're just missing the bigger picture. We don't have the right background to truly get what they're saying. Imagine trying to teach quantum physics to someone from the Middle Ages. You'd have to invent new words or wrap the ideas up in stories and symbols just to keep the knowledge alive until someone could finally unpack it. Maybe the Anunnaki had the same problem. So they hid advanced knowledge in stories, in buildings, in city layouts. They baked it into every part of their culture, put it right out in the open, and waited for a future civilization, maybe us, to finally figure out what was really there. Maybe that moment is happening right now. In just the last 50 years, we've built computers that can dig into the math buried in Sumerian tablets, stuff that would have taken human scholars lifetimes to sort through by hand. We stumbled onto fractal math and suddenly noticed those same patterns in Sumerian art and buildings, hinting they got recursion long before we put a name to it. We cracked the genetic code and realized their creation myths line up with the steps of genetic engineering. We mapped the solar system and found out their astronomy texts describe planets we only recently confirmed are out there. Every time we level up our own understanding, we spot new details in those ancient tablets, things we just couldn't see before, meanings that only show up once we have the tools to catch them. Back in 2016, a group at UC built machine learning tools to scan cuneiform tablets for patterns human translators might have missed. The software picked up some strange regularities in certain math texts, number sequences that don't fit any known Sumerian system. But when you run them through base 60, they line up with binary code. The researchers went public, but cautiously. They didn't want to overstate things. Maybe it was just a fluke. But these patterns keep showing up on tablets from all over, different cities and different centuries. At some point, it stops looking like coincidence. If the Sumerians did this on purpose, they hid information in a way nobody could crack until digital computing and information theory came along. Some tablets look like recipes for offerings to the gods, but if you read them with a chemist's eye, they're basically chemical formulas. Mix these things, heat until they glow like the evening star, cool under running water, store away from light. If you're a priest, it's ritual. If you're a scientist, it's lab work. Synthesis of compounds, precise ratios, temperature control. Modern chemists have actually followed some of these instructions. Sometimes they get real medicines out of it. Other times, the results have weird electromagnetic properties. A few of the recipes are too risky to try, with warnings about needing divine protection, which might mean safety gear or lab setups we haven't figured out yet. The musical tablets are just as strange. Some of them have hymns with marks for pitch, rhythm, and timing, When people play these on recreated Sumerian instruments, the music is haunting, sort of familiar, but also alien. Researchers notice something odd. The math behind the notes matches frequencies we use now for acoustic resonance and sound amplification. The temples where these pieces were performed, built with specific dimensions and materials, would have boosted those sounds in ways that could affect the body or mind. Did the Sumerians know about sound engineering, or did they just stumble onto it? Hard to say, but the evidence is there. And then there's the Epic of Gilgamesh, the oldest story we've got. In it, Gilgamesh hunts for immortality and meets Utnapishtim, who survived a flood and got eternal life from the gods. Utnapishtim tells him about a plan at the bottom of the ocean that restores youth. Gilgamesh gets it, but a snake steals it away. On the surface, it's a story about death and loss. But look closer, it's a metaphor. Knowledge, the plant, hidden in a tough, dangerous place, the deep ocean that can reverse aging. Now, scientists have actually found compounds in deep-sea creatures that slow or even reverse cell aging. So how did the Sumerians know to look to the ocean for secrets about longevity? Were they guessing, or did they have a source that already made these discoveries? The tablet that really stands out is the one everyone argues about, mostly because it's almost too straightforward. It's called BM 55892, and it sits in the British Museum, quietly stirring up debate. For decades, scholars have puzzled over the text scratched into its clay surface. At first glance, it's just a dedication to Enki, full of praise for his wisdom and generosity. But then you notice the odd bits, strange numbers, grammar that just doesn't line up with typical Sumerian. Dig a little deeper and those numbers start to look like something else. If you pull them out and run them through old Sumerian math, you end up with coordinates. Not latitude and longitude, since the Sumerians didn't use those. These are astronomical coordinates, right ascension and declination. They point to a spot in the sky, a place we now know holds a star system we didn't even spot until the 20th century. Why on earth would a Sumerian tablet hide the location of a star system you can't even see without a telescope? Why bother saving that kind of information unless it mattered? Some researchers think this was the Sumerians' way of marking where the Anunnaki came from, a cosmic return address. Others say it's more complicated, that the coordinates aren't just a place but a specific moment, a future event, a kind of cosmic appointment, maybe even a countdown. Like the tablet is saying, when you find this star, when these numbers make sense, you'll know it's time to reach out. It sounds like the stuff of sci-fi, but the numbers are there, burned into clay 4,000 years ago, pointing to something we've only just confirmed is real. Here's the part that really gets under your skin if you spend time with these tablets. Why would the Sumerians record information they couldn't use? Why write down mathematical formulas they couldn't solve, chemistry experiments they couldn't safely do, star data they couldn't possibly check? The only explanation that fits is they weren't writing for themselves. They were writing for us, for whoever came next, whoever finally had the tools to figure it all out. The Anunnaki, if you buy that story, knew that just telling people what they knew wouldn't survive the disaster they saw coming. So they hid their best knowledge in things that would last: clay tablets, stone temples. Stories passed from mouth to mouth. They trusted that someday someone would dig it up, dust it off, and finally understand. And that changes the whole picture of ancient history. These weren't clueless people stumbling around in the dark. They were guardians of something bigger, archivists copying and recopying things they barely understood themselves, but somehow knew mattered. Every time they copied a tablet, rebuilt a temple, retold a myth, it was an act of hope. Hope that the knowledge would survive, that someone someday would crack the code and put it to use. Now those tablets sit in museum vaults waiting. They've waited through the fall of Sumer, Babylon, Assyria, Persia, the Greeks, the Romans, through dark ages, wars, revolutions, and everything in between. They sat through all of it, keeping their secrets until we finally built the tools, computers, spectrometers, genetic sequencing, all the stuff that lets us peer inside clay and see what's really there. Now, little by little, we're starting to read them. We're finally seeing what the Sumerians tucked away for us, instructions written 5,000 years ago. But there's this nagging question that won't go away. If these are instructions, what exactly are we supposed to do with them? What did the Anunnaki want us to build or learn or become? Some of the messages are about astronomy, how to watch the sky and mark the cycles. Some are about math, revealing patterns that open up new corners of physics. Some even touch on biology, describing things that line up weirdly well with what we know about genetics and cells. Every piece we decode feels less like a discovery and more like we're remembering something. Like someone set us on this path long ago, nudging us to finally figure out what we were meant to understand. So if that's the case, if these tablets really are a curriculum, a kind of cosmic lesson plan meant to push humanity to a certain level, then you can't help but ask the obvious question. What happens when we finally crack them open for good? What happens when we figure out all the instructions, every last one? Are we being prepped for something? Is all of this just the groundwork for some meeting that was scheduled before anyone even knew how to write? Something between us and whoever the Anunnaki actually were. Something that only happens once we prove we can understand what they left behind. The tablets themselves don't say. They just sit there, waiting, silent and stubborn, holding on to their secrets until we invent the next tool or stumble onto the next revelation. Whatever it takes to peel back another layer. While that happens in dim museum basements and dusty university archives, scholars keep at it, picking up the same work that Sumerian scribes started 5,000 years ago, copying, translating, preserving. They keep the chain intact, make sure the knowledge survives, make sure the instructions are still there for when the moment, whatever that moment is, finally arrives. Maybe then we'll really be able to read what was pressed into that clay by hands who knew time was running out, who knew disaster was coming, who figured the only way to save what mattered was to hide it in something tougher than stone, tougher than empire, tougher even than memory. The wind still blows over Iraq. It picks up dust from ruins that were ancient when Rome was young. Under that dust, under meters of earth and centuries of forgetting, more tablets wait. Thousands, maybe tens of thousands, still buried, still untranslated, still clutching their fragments of the Anunnaki's message. Everyone's a piece of the manual. Everyone's another step in the lesson. All just waiting for us to finally be ready to get what they're saying. Maybe that time is now. Maybe every leap in our technology, every scientific breakthrough, every new tool we invent, brings us closer to the understanding the Anunnaki expected. Maybe they knew exactly how long it would take, exactly what discoveries needed to come first, before we could even begin to read the code they left. Maybe they've been watching, checking our progress against their timeline, waiting until we finally get to the point where we're ready for the whole message. Or maybe we've already gotten what we needed from them. Maybe by hiding knowledge in formats that forced us to invent advanced math, crack genetics, build computers, and master information theory just to figure it out. The Anunnaki weren't just sharing knowledge. They were steering us, making sure we grew in specific ways, hit certain milestones before we could unlock the next bit. The tablets aren't just a message. They're a system, a kind of slow-burn technology designed to guide civilization itself, making sure we only get what we're ready to handle. That would explain why so much of the information only makes sense now. The binary patterns jump out only after we invent digital computers. The genetic clues click only after we map DNA. The star charts matter only when we can see past our own solar system. Every discovery cracks open a new section of the tablets, as if the curriculum updates itself to match where we are, never letting us get ahead of ourselves. If you look at it this way, the Sumerian tablets aren't just relics. They're active tech, still running 5,000 years later, still doing the job they were built for. They're nudging humanity along a path the Anunnaki picked, so subtly we think we're just figuring things out on our own. Every tablet we decode isn't just a glimpse into the past. It's the next stage of a program that started the moment someone pressed a wedge into wet clay. And if that's true, it's mind-blowing. If the tablets are instructions, if they're guiding us, then maybe everything we call human progress has been staged. The scientific revolution, the industrial age, the digital era, they all happened because the knowledge was always there, hiding in the clay, waiting for us to unlock it at just the right moment. We like to think we're moving forward on our own, that we're the inventors. But maybe we're just following a path set down thousands of years ago, getting closer to whatever finish line the Anunnaki had in mind. So what's the destination? The tablets never just spell it out. We only get fragments, little glimpses, hints that never quite add up to a full story. Some texts talk about a return, a time when kingship will descend from heaven again, when the gods who left will come back and judge what we've built. Others hint at a transformation, a moment when people will become as the gods, with knowledge and powers that, right now, seem out of reach. And then there are the really strange ones, the hardest to translate. They sound like initiation rituals, a test or a threshold we have to cross before we get the Anunnaki's full knowledge. You see these pieces scattered everywhere, different tablets, different cities, different centuries. They're always wrapped in symbols and metaphors, always open to interpretation. But the core idea never changes. Something coming. Some event, some turning point where the relationship between humans and the Anunnaki shifts in a big way. When that happens, the stuff in these tablets won't just be history, it'll be a guidebook. Not old myths, but instructions. The information we'll need to handle whatever's next. Right now, researchers all over the world are teaming up to crack these tablets. They're sharing data, comparing translations, pushing things forward way faster than before. Universities in the US, like Penn, the Oriental Institute, the Smithsonian, are working with folks in London, Paris, Berlin, Baghdad, Istanbul. It's become a global effort to figure out what the Sumerians actually left behind. Machine learning. That's scanning thousands of tablets at once, picking up on things scholars would miss in a lifetime. Spectroscopy reveals faded writing you can't even see with the naked eye. 3D scans make perfect digital copies, so anyone, anywhere, can study them without risking the fragile originals. And it's working. Every year, more tablets get translated, more patterns show up, more connections appear between pieces that once seemed totally unrelated. The story coming into focus. The Sumerians weren't just writing about their own time. They were saving messages from the past, codes from the Anunnaki, meant for a future civilization with the right tools to unlock them. That's us. We're the audience they had in mind, and the message is starting to make sense. Some of the newly translated tablets, they're warnings. They talk about technologies we can create but probably shouldn't, knowledge that comes with real risks. One tablet describes a fire that consumes cities, a weapon that draws power from matter itself and poisons the earth for generations. Another talks about a man-made plague, a disease built in a lab, spreading out of control. Honestly, they sound a lot like nuclear weapons and engineered viruses, the kind of stuff we've invented recently. The Anunnaki seem to know about them and tried to warn us. How? Did they invent these things? Did they see what happened when they got used? Were they just telling us not to repeat their own disasters? Other tablets sketch out possible futures, different paths, depending on what choices we make. Some lead to success, to venturing out beyond Earth, to joining what they call the assembly of knowing civilizations. Others end in collapse, in self-destruction, in becoming a cautionary tale instead of a triumph. The language is all if this then that. If we choose war, we go extinct. If we choose to work together, we rise. The tablets aren't making predictions. They're laying out probabilities, outcomes the Anunnaki figured out by watching civilizations over ages or across worlds. This brings up a pretty unsettling idea. Maybe we're not the Anunnaki's first experiment. Maybe they've tried this before. Maybe they've planted knowledge in other rising civilizations, hidden instructions in their oldest stories, nudged them along, waited to see what happened. Maybe some of those civilizations got it right, figured out the clues, used the knowledge wisely, and moved on to whatever comes after. Maybe others blew it, destroyed themselves with their own inventions and faded away. Maybe that's what the tablets are really doing, showing us both outcomes, giving us a choice. Which future do we want to make real? When you look at the Epic of Gilgamesh this way, the whole thing hits differently. Gilgamesh is desperate for immortality. He wants to break out of the cage of being human. He tries to grab it, even dives to the bottom of the sea for a magical plant, but comes up empty. Instead, someone tells him that immortality isn't about living forever. It's about what you build: cities, laws, stories, knowledge, stuff that outlasts you. In the end, Gilgamesh comes to terms with dying, but he leaves behind a civilization. That's his real shot at lasting. Maybe that's the real takeaway. The Anunnaki aren't dangling some personal afterlife. They're offering the chance for a civilization to keep going, to make it through the rough patches, to crack the code and prove they're ready for the knowledge hidden in those ancient tablets. And that's probably why the knowledge wasn't handed over on a silver platter. They hid it in riddles for a reason. Decoding it isn't just about brain power, it's a test of an entire civilization. You need math, science, technology, teamwork that stretches across countries and generations. You need patience, grit, stubborn curiosity. You've got to build a society that can actually pull off translating thousands of tablets, spotting patterns buried in centuries of writing, running global research projects. If you can crack the code, you've proved you're grown up enough to use what's inside. Hiding the knowledge isn't just about keeping it safe. It's a filter. Only the civilizations that reach a certain level get access. Keeps the really dangerous stuff out of the hands of the reckless. Picture the scene. It's the middle of the night, lights burning in quiet archives all over the world. There are scholars hunched over tablets, translating lines nobody's read in 4,000 years. Some are digging into old favorites with new tech, finding odd details that everyone else missed. A handful are wrestling with the really tough tablets, the ones nobody's figured out, using machine learning or fresh linguistic tricks, chipping away at codes that have stayed silent for ages. Every time someone nails down a new word, spots a new pattern, or makes a surprising connection, the picture gets a little clearer. Bit by bit, that picture stops looking like old myths and starts to feel like something else. A message, maybe even a syllabus or a test. Instructions left behind by a civilization so advanced their tech seems like magic, their knowledge like revelation, their whole existence turned into legend. The Anunnaki, whoever they were, got it. They knew that teaching face-to-face doesn't last if civilizations fall apart. Stories get warped. Even written records can vanish or get twisted, so they built something tougher. They stored knowledge in all sorts of ways, made backup after backup, designed puzzles that only make sense once you've reached a certain level of know-how. Those Sumerian tablets, that's just one piece of the puzzle. The ziggurats with their hidden math and astronomy, another. The myths themselves, stories that carry ideas you can't just write down. Even the way the cities were built, where buildings sit on the map, it all encodes information. Each part backs up the others. Lose one, the rest keep the message alive. And each requires a different skill set to crack, so you only unlock the next level when you're ready to handle it. We've been at this for centuries, taking what we could with whatever tools we had. The Greeks studied Babylonian math and astronomy, picked up what they could and ran with it. Islamic scholars in the Middle Ages kept that flame alive, inventing algebra, charting the skies. During the Renaissance, Europeans dug up old texts, sparked the scientific revolution, and rediscovered secrets the ancients already knew. Every generation pushed forward, built better tools, and dug deeper. But it's only in the last few decades that we've really started to peel back the layers. Computers spot codes in the math that nobody could see by hand. High-tech imaging brings faded writing back to life. Global databases let researchers compare tablets that used to be scattered and hidden away. Even gene sequencing lets us test whether those Sumerian stories about humans being designed might have a grain of truth. What we're seeing is strange, honestly. The tablets weren't just close, they nailed it. Not in some poetic sense, but factually. The kind of accuracy that shouldn't even be possible unless the Sumerians knew things we didn't think ancient Mesopotamians could know. Stuff they couldn't have figured out with the tools and tech they had. So where did it come from? The story points to the Anunnaki. The supposed teachers from the sky who laid the foundations of civilization packed their knowledge into messages tough enough to survive thousands of years, then left behind a promise. Every single tablet hints at it. Prove yourself, crack the codes, use the knowledge wisely, and maybe, just maybe, they'll come back. Then again, maybe they never really left. Maybe they've been watching us all along, tracking our progress by the milestones they set, waiting for us to hit that next big moment. Some of these astronomical tablets even include dates and coordinates, timing for rare alignments in the sky that only come around every few thousand years. People went wild over the one in 2012, tying it to Mayan calendars and end-of-the-world predictions. But the Sumerian tablets don't talk about endings. They talk about chances, windows when the gates between worlds stand open, or that which was hidden becomes visible, or the assembly of the wise may gather. 2012 came and went without fireworks, but right after, research into the tablets took off. Suddenly, machine learning started cracking cuneiform at a pace no one expected. Scholars from all over the world started teaming up. Even private collectors started turning over tablets that had been locked away for years. It was like the alignment wasn't meant to be a big event you'd see. It just set things in motion. It started something that's still unfolding, opening up knowledge that used to be out of reach, making patterns visible that nobody saw before, and getting us ready for, well, whatever comes next, once we finally decode the rest of the tablets. Now the next big alignment is set for the mid-2030s if we go by what's written in these astronomical tablets. What's supposed to happen? Hard to say. The crucial sections are still a mystery. They're written in some odd, maybe ancient dialect, or use technical words we haven't cracked yet. But the date is there, clear as day, wrapped up in astronomical coordinates that don't leave room for doubt. Something's set to happen, or at least, something becomes possible when the sky lines up the way the tablets describe. So are we on the clock? You look at how fast Sumerian studies are growing, how quickly more tablets are surfacing, how decoding is speeding up, and it starts feeling like it's all part of a plan. Did the Anunnaki really expect it to take us about 5,000 years to get from planting wheat to building the internet? And did they time everything so we'd reach the right level just before the next big celestial event? It sounds like a wild theory, I know. But then you look at the evidence, the crazy precision of their astronomical predictions, the way they built in backup systems so the knowledge would survive. The fact that certain things only become legible once we invent the right tools. We get more out of the tablets as our tech gets better. Is it just a string of wild coincidences? Or is it all by design? If it's the latter, then we're living in the closing act of a plan that started 5,000 years ago, closing in on a moment the Anunnaki themselves thought was worth encoding in their most protected records. So what's coming? The tablets talk about contact, reunion, maybe even judgment or transformation. They say we'll be evaluated, our choices, our progress, all measured by standards the Anunnaki set. They talk about knowledge being handed over, not hidden in puzzles this time, but given directly, once we're ready to handle it. They paint a picture of a turning point, where humanity crosses a line and becomes something new. A civilization finally ready to join the assembly of knowing civilizations that the Anunnaki belong to, or maybe serve. This is what the tablets are really about. Not just a stash of old knowledge, though there's plenty of that. Not just a record of what came before, though they hold onto those stories too. They're a roadmap, a checklist for civilization, almost like a set of hurdles we have to clear before we're ready for whatever's next. All that math, astronomy, medicine, engineering, it's prep work. We had to figure these things out not for their own sake, but to prove we could. To show we have the brains, the memory, the teamwork it takes to step up to the next level. And we're getting there, closer than anyone before us. We've cracked enough of the code to glimpse what it's saying. We've learned enough to use some of what's inside. We've come far enough to realize there's still a lot more waiting to be found. The tablets aren't just old museum pieces anymore. They're part of a system, still doing their job, nudging us toward a goal. Whether we make it, whether we pass the test the Anunnaki left for us, that's up to us now. It comes down to what we do with the knowledge we've managed to pull from the clay. Do we work together or tear each other down? Do we preserve or destroy? Do we prove we deserve whatever inheritance the Anunnaki left behind? The tablets are still waiting, tucked away in museum basements and archives. They've waited through everything: empires rising and falling, plagues, wars, chaos. They were built to wait. The knowledge in them was set aside for this moment, for us, finally equipped to read what was written back when writing itself was new. The Anunnaki left behind instructions. We're finally starting to understand them. And the big question that keeps every researcher up at night, the one that feels both thrilling and a little terrifying, is simple. When we finally finish decoding, when we really get what the Anunnaki wanted us to understand, what happens then? The tablets don't spell it out. Or maybe they do, and we just haven't figured out that part yet. Maybe the last, most important clue is still buried somewhere in the Iraqi desert, waiting for future archaeologists who haven't even been born. Or maybe it's hiding in tablets we've already found, but ignored because they look too broken or too boring. Maybe it's not in a single tablet at all, but in the way all the pieces fit together, a bigger pattern that only shows up once we've filled in enough of the puzzle. What we do know, the Sumerians protected these tablets with everything they had. They made copies, kept them safe through disasters, passed them down for generations. Even if they didn't fully grasp what they were saving, they knew it mattered. That someone someday would need these instructions. That the future the Anunnaki promised, or warned about, would show up, and when it did, the words pressed into clay would suddenly matter more than ever. Maybe that future is just around the corner. Maybe it's already here. And right on cue, the Anunnaki's instructions, locked away for 5,000 years, are finally readable. Maybe that's luck, maybe it's fate. Who knows if we're uncovering the truth or just being led to it? Are we just piecing together the past, or are we waking up something meant for the future? Either way, the tablets are still here, quiet, patient, waiting for us to finally understand what they've been saying since the dawn of memory. Out in the desert, the wind sweeps over the ruins of Sumer, carrying dust from cities that were ancient before Rome was even a whisper. And in that dust, in every grain, you can almost feel the echo of the hands that pressed words into clay, hoping time would be kind. They left their message, trusting that someday, someone would be wise enough to read it and brave enough to follow wherever it leads. That someday everyone talks about, it's here. And that's someone who's supposed to step up, that's us. The instructions are right in front of us, pressed into clay, written in wedge-shaped marks that have survived longer than whole empires. Now, finally, we're starting to understand what they're saying. What we do with this knowledge, how we use it, if we can actually live up to what the Anunnaki left behind. Well, that's going to shape more than just our story so far. It shapes what comes next. The future they saw coming. The future they tried to get us ready for. It all starts when we really understand those ancient instructions and decide what it means to follow the guidance of beings who weren't gods at all, just teachers who believed we'd eventually learn what they came to show. Other tablets talk about possible futures, branches in the road, all depending on the choices we make. Some paths lead to good things, prosperity, going beyond Earth, joining what they call the assembly of knowing civilizations. Other paths, not so great, collapse, self-destruction, becoming just another story other civilizations tell as a warning. The language is full of ifs. If we choose war, then extinction. If we choose cooperation, then we get a shot at something better. The tablets aren't predicting the future. They're laying out probabilities, outcomes the Anunnaki figured out based on patterns they'd seen over thousands of years, maybe even across worlds. That brings up an uncomfortable idea, one scholars don't really like but can't ignore. What if we're not the first? What if the Anunnaki tried this before, planting knowledge in new civilizations, hiding instructions in their earliest texts, nudging things along to see what would happen? Maybe some civilizations figured it out, used the knowledge wisely, and made it to the next level. Maybe others blew it, destroyed themselves with tech they weren't ready for, and vanished. Just another cautionary tale in the Anunnaki's records. Maybe these tablets aren't just about us. Maybe they're a collection of possible outcomes, showing what happens if we get it right, and what happens if we don't, leaving the choice up to us. Even the Epic of Gilgamesh hits different when you think about it like this. Here's Gilgamesh, a king who can't accept being human, chasing immortality all the way to the ends of the earth. He finds Utnapishtim, who's been given eternal life after the flood, but Utnapishtim tells him straight up, this isn't something you can just earn. It was a one-time deal. Still, Gilgamesh gets a shot. He's told to stay awake for 7 days and 7 nights to see if he can conquer even the need for sleep. He fails right away. He wakes up to find loaves of bread baked each day, from fresh to moldy, proof he slept the whole time. The lesson: you can't escape human limits just by trying harder, but there's something else, a plan at the bottom of the sea supposed to restore youth. Gilgamesh actually gets it. He holds the power to turn back aging in his hands. And then, while he's distracted, a serpent snatches it away. Most people read this as a tragedy, a story about accepting death. But what if it's more like instructions? What if the plant stands for knowledge, maybe even the secret to life extension, or how we age, or how cells repair themselves? Stuff that's hidden in hard-to-reach places like the ocean depths where life gets weird and interesting. Knowledge will eventually find something that could change everything for us, but also something risky, symbolized by the serpent. Wisdom and temptation all tangled together. The serpent doesn't destroy the plant. It eats it, which means once this knowledge is out there, you can't take it back. Gilgamesh goes home without immortality, but he's changed. He shows his friend the walls he built around Uruk, the lasting work of his own hands, and says, look at this. This is what matters. Not living forever as an individual, but building something that lasts. Creating civilization, knowledge, and culture that outlive any one person. That's our real shot at immortality. Maybe that's what the Anunnaki wanted us to get. Maybe those instructions on the tablets aren't about making us immortal as individuals or giving us godlike powers. They're about teaching us how to build civilizations that last, societies that can survive disaster, hold on to knowledge, and keep going even when everything seems lost. Real immortality isn't about never dying. It's about keeping the flame alive, passing it on. And the only way to do that is to understand what the Anunnaki figured out, whatever that was. Back in the winter of 2018, a group at Harvard decided to chase this idea. They started mapping out the Sumerian tablets, tracking which ones had been translated, what they actually said, and when those translations happened. Then they lined all that up with the timeline of modern science, basically, which discoveries popped up when. What they found was weirdly interesting, enough that they published it in a journal that sits somewhere between archaeology and the history of science. Turns out, whenever we started to crack some new area of math or science, we'd suddenly make sense of tablets we'd already had for ages. Once mathematicians sorted out geometry, Pythagorean triples in the tablets finally clicked. When calculus came along, we noticed exponential stuff that had been sitting there the whole time. Same with binary numbers and digital computing. You could see this pattern in other fields too. Medical tablets packed with strange recipes only made sense once chemistry had the tools to analyze the compounds. Astronomical tablets that looked like gibberish suddenly pointed to real stars and coordinates once telescopes could check them. You could say it's just a coincidence. Maybe we only bother translating tablets that line up with what we already know, and the rest just sit there, untouched, waiting. But the Harvard team suggested something else. Maybe the tablets are layered. Surface meanings anyone can find, but deeper stuff only shows up once you have the right concepts. It's like they're waiting for each generation to catch up, revealing just enough for the time. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, who led the project, put it this way in an interview. It's as if the tablets are teaching us, letting out information at our pace. When we're ready for calculus, we find calculus in tablets we'd already translated but never really understood. When we're ready for genetics, suddenly the old myths read like genetic codes. The tablets don't change, we change. And as we change, we see more. If she's right, the Anunnaki did something way more advanced than just storing facts. They set up a system that actually adapts, unfolding as we grow. That takes serious vision, not just guessing what future people might want, but predicting exactly when and in what order they'll find things out, how their science will move. Unless, of course, the Anunnaki had seen this movie before. Maybe they'd watched other civilizations follow the same steps: farming, astronomy, math, genetics, over and over. Maybe humanity's journey isn't so unique, and the sequence is almost predictable for anyone who's seen enough worlds rise and fall. Sometimes, in those early morning hours when the museum is dead quiet and the tablets are just sitting there in the dark, it's hard not to imagine they're waiting for us. Not just sitting around, but waiting like a teacher waits for a student to finally get it. Patient, but sure that one day the light bulb will go on. The Anunnaki, whoever they were, knew nothing lasts forever. Empires crumble, knowledge disappears, disasters wipe the slate clean. So they built something tougher than all that. They pressed their lessons into clay, something that could outlast fire, flood, and war. And then they stepped back and trusted that eventually, when we were ready, we'd learn not just to read the words, but to really understand what they were trying to say. We're figuring things out bit by bit. Every time someone cracks a new analytical method, or two totally different fields start sharing notes, or some unexpected connection pops up, we get closer. The tablets are giving up their secrets. The instructions are starting to make sense. Whatever curriculum the Anunnaki set in motion thousands of years ago, we're moving through it. And that leads to the question that keeps a lot of researchers up at night, staring at old photos of clay fragments, wondering what's coming. So what actually happens when we finish? What's waiting after the final lesson? Some tablets drop hints. They talk about a turning point, a kind of threshold or test, a moment that decides if a civilization really got the message. The language is pretty poetic, gates opening, rising to higher places, joining the wise. But maybe there's something more there, something direct. Maybe other civilizations already graduated from the Anunnaki's curriculum and moved on. Maybe they're out there now, watching us, waiting for us to catch up, ready to welcome us once we prove we've truly learned what we needed to. Or maybe the Anunnaki themselves are watching, gone, but not completely gone. Maybe they're still out there somewhere, keeping an eye on things since they left Sumer 4 millennia ago. Maybe they left a signal hidden in the tablets, a pattern that only shows up when we've pieced enough together, something that'll trigger as soon as we demonstrate that we finally get it. Imagine, while scholars sift through archives, algorithms run ancient scripts, and teams bridge old knowledge with new science, we're inching up to that trigger point. And if a signal does come through, what would it say? Maybe it's simple, you're ready. Or maybe it's an invitation, a set of coordinates, instructions on how to reach out. Or it could be a warning, last-minute advice before we step into responsibilities the Anunnaki understood but we're only now starting to grasp. The tablets don't say. If there's a secret, they're holding on to it, locked away until the right moment. In the basement of the University of Pennsylvania Museum, deep in the Oriental Institute, tucked away in collections all over America, Europe, the Middle East, the tablets are waiting. Some we've translated. A handful have been scanned with tech that pulls out details no one saw before. But thousands more just sit there, untouched, covered in those wedge marks. Who knows what's on them? Maybe it's just receipts, or maybe it's the key to understanding our place in a universe way more complicated than we thought. Every tablet counts. Each one is another piece of the puzzle. Somewhere in those unread tablets, still buried in a rock or resting in museum basements, might be the last piece, the line that makes everything else snap into place. The answer to questions we've been chasing since the first time we looked up at the stars and wondered if we were alone. The Sumerians, they didn't feel alone. They wrote about their teachers, the Anunnaki who came down from the sky, set up civilization, and then left with a promise hidden in everything they left behind. If humanity proved itself, if we learned what we were supposed to, if we cracked the code and used the knowledge well, the goodbye wouldn't be forever. The teaching would start again. That old connection would come back. So are we close? Have we learned enough? Have we figured out enough instructions to show we really get what the Anunnaki tried to teach? Maybe the tablets themselves are the test. Maybe just being able to read them, see the patterns, recognize what's underneath, that's the proof they're looking for. If that's true, then every scholar hunched over cuneiform, every coder building algorithms for ancient texts, every team linking Sumerian science to what we know now, they're all part of something way bigger than an academic project. They're finishing a test set in motion 4,000 years ago, showing that humanity finally has the wisdom, patience, and teamwork to unlock knowledge that's been waiting for us all this time. So what happens when the test ends? When the last tablet finally gives up its secrets and every instruction makes sense, then what? Maybe just silence. Maybe that's all the Anunnaki ever meant to give us. They teach, we learn, and once we know enough, it's up to us. We get to decide what to do with all that knowledge. Maybe that's when we stop being students and become something else, equals, ready to join a bigger community that's gone through the same thing, out there in other worlds, under other suns, in places we can barely imagine. Or maybe the tablets aren't finished with us yet. Maybe they're waiting. Maybe when we finally cross some hidden line, really understand everything, they'll shift. Suddenly, a new layer peels back. A last message, one that's been hiding in plain sight, meant only for those who have solved every puzzle so far. Maybe that's the real lesson, the answer to the question every wedge in every clay tablet quietly asks. Why are we learning? What's all this for? What do the Anunnaki want us to become? The desert wind still moves across Iraq, just like it always has, carrying Sumerian dust into the future. Somewhere under that dust, more tablets wait. In quiet rooms, scholars lean over photographs and fragments, piecing together a story that started thousands of years ago and might reach all the way to the stars. In the clay, shaped by hands that knew just how fragile knowledge could be, instructions have survived. They wait. They endure. They're ready for the moment when humanity can finally understand what was written back when writing was new, and the gods walked the earth. That moment's getting closer. Maybe it's already here and we just haven't noticed. Maybe the next translation, the next pattern, the next flash of insight will pull it all together. Then we'll know. We'll see what the Anunnaki wanted for us, what they hoped we'd become, and what's next for a species that learned to read messages pressed into clay by teachers who came from the sky and left us with a promise that still echoes through time. The tablets remember, and now, at last, we're starting to remember with them. In a small office at the Smithsonian late on a Friday night, Dr. Robert Chen sits alone, a photo of a clay tablet spread out on his desk. The fragment, barely bigger than his hand, came out of the ground in Nippur back in 1952. They cataloged it, but nobody ever really translated it. The wedge marks are sharp, the lines still clear after 4,000 years underground. Dr. Chen's been staring at this piece for months, and it's been bothering him the whole time. The writing itself is perfect. The words are simple, but the tablet describes something that makes no sense for the Sumerians, a way to measure something called the breadth of stars, using tools that don't fit anything we know from Mesopotamian history. The measurements are exact, the kind of math you see in real science, not poetry. And the point of it all, the tablet says, is to know when the gate opens. Dr. Chen doesn't believe in magic gates to other worlds. He's a scholar. He knows ancient languages, he trusts evidence, he works the way you're supposed to. Still, he can't shake the feeling that this tablet is trying to tell him something that matters, something that's almost impossible to see now, but not completely lost. The Sumerians who pressed these marks into clay thought they were writing down real, useful information. They weren't making up stories. They were recording processes, things they thought worked, even if they didn't understand all the reasons why. So Dr. Chen does what researchers do when nothing makes sense. He reaches out. He sends the tablet photo to friends in other fields. Maybe an astronomer will spot some familiar method. Maybe a physicist will see hints of real phenomena. Maybe an engineer will read between the lines and recognize the description of a tool. And then he waits because somewhere in the overlap between old words and new science, there's meaning. The Anunnaki put it there. The Sumerians kept it safe. And with enough patience and teamwork, humanity will figure it out. This is how the work goes on, one tablet at a time, one scholar at a time, one connection leading to the next. Every little discovery adds a new layer to what we know. A fresh translation might be the missing piece that suddenly makes the whole puzzle snap together. The instructions are still there, pressed into clay by hands that worked with purpose, choosing each word like it really mattered, knowing they were passing knowledge through a gulf of time their own world could barely imagine. Museums everywhere, university basements, private collections, these places are full of tablets waiting their turn. Some get the spotlight, shown off in exhibits or printed in textbooks. Others just sit in storage, seen only by a handful of experts. Still, every single one counts. Each is a scrap of the message the Anunnaki left behind, a piece of a bigger story that only starts to make sense when enough fragments come together. Maybe you'll never actually hold one, never feel that cool, heavy clay shaped by someone 4,000 years ago. Maybe you'll never trace those wedge-shaped signs that spell out words in a language nobody speaks anymore, kept alive by scribes who thought they were guarding something sacred. But the tablets are still for you. That's the whole point. They were made to reach across the ages and speak to people who wouldn't even exist until the Sumerians were long gone. They're written in a code meant to be cracked only when we finally knew enough to see what was right in front of us. And they wait. They've always waited, holding out for the day when their meaning finally lands, and we take the next step in a journey that began the moment the Anunnaki touched down and decided that knowledge had to survive, no matter what. That journey isn't over. The tablets are still here, somewhere in those wedge-shaped marks pressed into clay when the world was young and broken. Instructions sit quietly, ready to change how we see ourselves, where we came from, and what we're meant to be. The answer's in the clay. It always was, and now at last we're starting to understand it.